looking at the last slide, it's interesting to see all the different companies that are represented here. We're all united by technology, but we, represented here just in this room, there are so many different industries between sports, broadcast, corporate events, live events, music, entertainment. We all share a common bond with the technology that we operate, and the skill sets are so interchangeable across these different industries. That's what we wanted to focus on today, is how do we crew talent across these industries? How do we identify talent and make the right connections there? Represented here, we have 3 folks from ASG, and it also is indicative of just the variety of it's indicative of the variety of the industries that are represented here. I'm fumbling on my words already. So I'll briefly introduce us. Sean Sandoval is here from Stage Ops. You want to give yourself a brief introduction? Yeah.
Let me turn this on. Hello? Hello? Yep, can you hear me? Cool. Yep, hi, I'm Sean. Nice to meet you.
Stage Ops is a staffing agency that staffs everything from corporate events, concert tours. If you've ever been to Coachella, you've seen Stage Ops and what they're capable of producing. You're the founder and CEO and the principal staffing manager, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, the all things.
Yeah. And then Jennifer Patterson is an executive producer with Advanced Systems Group.
Hello. Thank you, John. So, hi, I go by JP, and I'm an executive producer at ASG, and I've come from a long background of production in a lot of different spaces. Is it okay if we give a little context?
Absolutely, please. Yeah.
So just on the topic of this panel, crewing talent across industries, I'll give a little background about, where I come from and how I got here. I started very, very early in my career at Sony Pictures, so I was working on the movie studio side of things. And I kind of looked around and just noticed that the people who were doing well there were in their 50s, and I was about 20, so it was going to take me a while to get to the point of success that I was hoping for. But I had a lot of friends who were out in the field making music videos and network promos as producers and having a ton of fun. I thought, oh, this is perfect for me. So I switched over to line producing. I was working with directors, putting their shoots together. I still maintained all those great connections that I had from the movie studios years. I was at Sony Pictures and Paramount Pictures. And one of the things that I found was that a lot of the directors that I was working with in music videos and commercials were film directors who liked to fill the gaps in between big film projects with some other parts of the industry and they were really excited about commercials. And it was, sometimes there was even crossover in their crews. So they bring their same crews to a little, network promo that I was doing that had just done a huge movie. And it kind of worked out for everything. So I learned really early on that the production community is a very big community that supports and upholds one another through the ebbs and flows of production work, which is largely feast or famine. I became a young mom in my early 20s, and the 14-hour days out in the field as a line producer were not great for my new life situation. So I took to post-production because that had better hours for me. I didn't know anything about post because when you're in production, your job is just to get it in the can, and post is somebody else's problem. But a friend of mine was running a post house, and they brought me in. They gave me a chance. And when I was there, my first week on the job, I remember asking an editor what an ISKI code was. And they said, oh my God, please don't ever say that in front of anybody else. So I had a couple of fumbles and embarrassing moments. But after I picked up some of the lingo and some of the specifics, pertinent to post-production, I was able to have a really thriving career as a producer in that space. And I learned a ton about the value of the post-production process in what we do. So it also broadened my own thinking and exposure to our craft. And I think it just made me a better producer. I started working with big advertising agencies on their projects, Wyden and Kennedy of note, and they had a mentality there where they would try to just recruit in great talent and take them outside of their comfort zones, which I often find in really strong creative environments. And when you have an individual who shows a natural curiosity and an interest, they'll give you an opportunity. So next thing I know, I'm producing Super Bowls for Wyden and Kennedy. A little bit out of my, there was a little bit of a learning curve on that space, but my first Super Bowl project, I won an Emmy. So it worked out for me. And then from there, brands started getting into creating in-house studios for themselves. It's a smart business model. I absolutely understand why. They often were looking to production partners and to experts to help bring this expertise that they didn't have in-house. So I then kind of switched over to working for brands such as Intel. I've worked for a number of brands in the big tech space, but it's all under this discipline of, live action production, video production, print production, design, post-production, and what have you. So I think that I've also used a lot of my connections from the movie studio days and the commercial days to bring to that tech space in production as well. When I was at Intel, we were working on this volumetric stage project. I learned at the time that some of the major studios had turned Intel down. They weren't interested in hosting an R&D lab for a big tech company. They wanted TV shows on their stages. And I was able to call on a former boss of mine and board of directors at the studio to take a meeting with us and explain why this was actually a great opportunity. And we did a 5-year deal for Intel with the volumetric stage, and it worked out really great for everybody. So anyways, just to bring to the table, thanks for letting me be long-winded for a moment, but I just have a personal passion for this space, and I've seen the benefits of networking across multiple industries and bringing your production expertise to a wide variety of clients and industries.
Thank you. That was great. And so finally, Alex Haynes has spent more than a decade at Google. He started as a broadcast engineer and then later moved into corporate operations, where he developed the global broadcast standards for all the live events happening at Google. He took part in developing the infrastructure as well as the support models that were then deployed worldwide. Alex, you want to share?
I'm a little bit of a product of hiring across industries, because I started in post-production and then, just saw a need for a broadcast engineer, and was like, well, I know video, so you kind of learn that. So it is sort of an interesting industry in that there's transferable skills.
Absolutely. So, JP, I'll start with you. As you're developing a team to produce either a shoot, an event, whatever it is, what are the attributes that you look for, and how do you put together a team in a new circuit where you have no network yet?
In terms of aptitude, in our industry, we're great at problem solving. We're great at working within high-pressure environments, high-stake environments. That whole calm under pressure piece is important. The ability to bring creative visions to life, the ability to work with artists and creative people, but then also the ability to bridge that gap between the artists and creators and the business stakeholders. So really, it's a lot of those soft skills. And I'd say a natural interest in the cross-training, because, ideally we're working with folks who are curious and have a natural interest in a different industry and are excited to take that leap. I think the philosophy is that it works best when it's instigated by an individual who has that spirit of entrepreneurship and growth. And then we can support that as managers and mentors to make sure that we're giving them the proper training that they would need for this specific vertical. And so then that's really on us to have a commitment to the mentorship piece of things. So for instance, when I was at Goodby Silverstein and Partners as director of content there, one of the challenges that we were having was a lot of the directors, it was the same high-profile, big-scale directors that we used over and over for our commercial shoots. And they had tasked me with exposing the agency to emerging directors, and that would help solution for our clients a little better, because there's a wide variety of budgets out there, and not every Steven Spielberg can't direct every project. So there's a big gap, though, because people tend to like to go towards proven entities. So one of the things that people get out of working with a proven entity is that insurance. Okay, I'm going to work with this individual because I know they've done it 100 times before. And when you're looking to nurture talent and go outside of that, it introduces a level of risk. So that puts a little bit more responsibility on the mentorship piece. But that's where we can help work with individuals who we feel have that aptitude, and we can train them up appropriately. I mean, I think the strategy piece of the business model is to say, we need to create an upskilling program, or a program that's going to get these individuals ready for this. So in that instance, we created a program that welcomed a dozen emerging filmmakers. It trained them across 12 weeks on all of the clients that we had in-house and all of the different types of work that they were doing. And by doing that, we were able to bring in documentary filmmakers, music video filmmakers, just give them the slight training that they needed to apply those storytelling talents to a commercial field. And we had huge success. It was great for the filmmakers. We were also giving them an introduction to a new space that they hadn't worked in before, thereby creating opportunities for our own community. And we were also, solutioning for our clients. So I always look to create those win-win outcomes. And I think that's the spirit to go into this kind of cross-training with.
You mentioned risk, about whenever you cross-train talent, that always comes with an element of risk. And Sean, I'm curious to hear your take on how do you mitigate that risk as you are putting new talent in new directions, or maybe giving people an opportunity they may not have, thought of before.
So new talent, that's interesting, right? So there's companies that hire, employees, and there's companies that hire contractors. And I feel like knowing, the difference between the two is going to be very helpful with the direction to go when you're recruiting talent. So I'll go with the W-2 employees route. And the idea behind it is to build a recruiting system ahead of time, so you're not scrambling at the last second. Oh, we got this project, now we have to scramble to find these 20 people to do these certain things. But to have a system built ahead of time that's a consistent drip of recruiting, right? Like it doesn't end. I feel like when a project pops up, some companies are kind of scrambling. Okay, we've got to hire these 20 people. And the idea is to when you're building your company, to not forget that you also need to build a recruiting system and not wait until a project pops up to realize, oh, I need to hire people. And the way that I found that it's most successful is to have a workflow to create an experience for the people applying to your company, which could be simple things like a form on your website, asking the right questions, and then that form turning into a trigger for a link that would create a scheduling link to them. So now you've kind of built your recruiting system in such a way where it's almost running itself, right? You got people applying, you got people getting a triggered email to schedule an interview, and then you got the interview popping up on your calendar. And it doesn't even necessarily need to be you doing the interviews. You can have somebody else in your team doing it, maybe even a virtual assistant, just recording the Zoom interview that's happening with the people that are wanting to work for your company. So my view on it is to build that system ahead of time, let it run, let it keep going. Don't let it stop, because you're just going to accumulate new people. You're going to accumulate all this talent. And when these projects pop up, all you've got to do is look in your database, look in your spreadsheets, do some filtering based on the answers they've provided, watch the Zoom videos that were already archived and say, all right, we've got these 20 videos that our assistant has already, went through and with these new recruits, and you should be able to plan ahead for these things rather than kind of scrambling, like what's going to be the best talent, but build a system. And I'm not saying, build this system, quickly, in an hour. Like, spend some time with it. Hire an assistant to sit with you and be like, how should we build this like workflow? How should we build this experience for somebody who wants to work for our company? So all we've got to do is just turn on the tap. It runs. You've got just a database of overflowing with people that have applied. You've already got the interviews recorded. And then you can start matching up those people with the project that you have coming up. I think that's a good way to kind of plan ahead,
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to think of it in the two different paradigms of hiring, like long-term employees that are full-time, like in the corporate environment, versus freelance employees who, for touring or for like one-off gigs, and thinking about your framework in sort of, especially when you're hiring for long-term, making sure that they have a growth potential, that there's vertical growth ability there, to make sure you try to minimize attrition as much as possible, because you're teaching valuable skills, and I think the ability to learn and grow and cross-train is worth thinking about when you're building that framework for hiring.
Yeah, so as you have your long-term goals of like building a full-time team, making that as effective and robust as it possibly can for whatever you have ahead of you, at the same time, sometimes you get bogged down by short-term goals. If you have a really heavy event stack in front of you, you may not have the staffing for that, and you have to flex with freelancers, and sometimes you might have to, scramble. If I'm understanding you right, essentially what you're saying, Sean, is that by having a robust process in place, you liberate yourself of that pain point by using the process to alleviate you of the stress of satisfying those short-term goals.
Yeah. It's like, are you working in your business or are you working on your business? If you're working in your business, you're going to be the one doing the interviews. You're going to be the one building the system. You're going to be, making sure that a form is built out on your website to capture people that want to work for your company, and also making sure that you've got at least 10, 15 different avenues where people can apply to your company. You can do posts on Indeed, LinkedIn, and have them just go. Like, just make those posts, make those job posts, and just let them keep going. If you got to put $20 a month or whatever it is, it's worth it, because it's building the infrastructure for you, so that way when a project does pop up, you're not scrambling for people and looking for referrals. And I like to say that I think the referral model is kind of old technology, in my opinion, at this point, because we have so much technology in front of us now to connect to people digitally online. So I don't feel like you're going to get best quality if you continue with a referral-based model, because each referral just kind of gets lower in quality, right? Like, it's not very sustainable over time. So to have that, to put in the time and not be lazy about it, but actually really focus on what should this recruiting system be. And like I said, it could be simple forms on your website that lead to an interview. Hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I think so. Essentially, it's like what you do with those forms and how you collate all that information in a way that makes it useful to you, to where you can then look and see all of this, all this talent that you have.
Yeah. I mean, everyone knows their business, right? They know what skills they want these people to have, that they want to hire on their team. And again, I'm speaking on a W-2 employee model, right? Like, some of you might be hiring contractors. Some of you really like to have W-2 employees because you want to know that you're compliant in all different angles. I've talked to a lot of lawyers about the contractor employee, and pretty much all lawyers say, we are not allowed to recommend contractors for a business, like especially a labor or staffing, anything where you have control over those people. So that's kind of why I steer more towards like an employee type of format of how people get paid and how they get recruited and they apply. Yeah.
If I can just pile on top of that, what you're speaking about is, us as a production partner taking on that responsibility of building a bench of talent, grooming the talent, training the talent, identifying the talent, because we're in the production community in that ecosystem. So not all of our clients have the level of access that we would have to these types of roles and individuals. And then also, ensuring that we're being that compliant piece of it for our clients, and that we're crewed up with a bench of talent that's quick turn, meeting the, constantly shifting demands of our industry. And in the content consuming landscape and live events and all of it, it's gotten very different, especially in a digital environment. And so, it's a lot of quick turn. You need to be ready to jump. So absolutely, like having that strategic side of growing that roster of talent early on, doing so thoughtfully, methodically, so you're not cutting any corners, and then just really having it at the ready for when those opportunities arise.
I would just sort of repeat what Sean said earlier, because I think that's worth highlighting. Like, referrals are great; they're a great tool, but that's not a framework for hiring in a sustainable model. I agree with that.
Yeah. So as you are identifying which talent you want to apply in, say, a given application, and you have, someone that you're going to pair up on a certain crew, you're building a team long term, how do you go about identifying what attributes you're looking for? Because, certain industries really require certain attributes. Other industries really require different attributes, even if the technology is the same. You might be operating the same equipment, but in a corporate environment, for example, it takes a different aptitude than somebody who might be touring with a band, on touring the world, doing that grind. How do you go about identifying those attributes for any given application?
So my biggest one, after having spent a decade at Google, all of our performance reviews, one of the bullet points is talk about your ability to thrive in ambiguity. And it's sort of that. It's like be able to make your own job, be able to figure out new things without needing too much direction. So that's always, to me, like one of the big ones. It's like, can I throw you at this project? And it comes down, we're talking about compliance, and I think structuring the job descriptions, the job roles, understanding that roles shift, roles change. But if you set that framework out to begin with, you can find talent that can figure out what they can add.
I think roles shift and change along with new opportunities, and it really helps the workforce for us to be able to promote that. And we have upskilling every time there's new production technology introduced into our field. I think a great example of this is like clean energy jobs. You have, let's say, plumbers or electricians who are very skilled in one aspect of that field. But then when solar gets embraced, or new PV systems, a new technology, and then there's a boom in that industry, with a little bit of training and certification, they can have an entirely new broadened career in a whole other field. So it's kind of future-proofing and giving resilience to one's own career.
I totally agree. And I know that AI is sort of the hot button topic that everybody's talking about, but nobody really has a super clear vision of what it's actually going to contribute, and having the type of talent that can figure out, for example, AI, like how can I apply this tool to my industry? That type of thinking.
Yeah, we've already spoken a lot today about AI, and one common theme that keeps resonating with me is an emphasis that AI, it's still a tool, and that it's the people using the AI that make it successful or not. And there's a huge emphasis on the human element of AI. And Sean, you mentioned that, at its core, staffing is essentially connecting people with people. And so I think that resonates as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's even vendors that have gear. I mean, you're still kind of connecting people with people, because if you send your gear with some text and the client doesn't like your text, it doesn't matter how, you know, shiny your gear is. They're just not having a good time. So, you know, I think that also goes back to making sure that you have that like system in place of like a recruiting built out system. You know, just the same as you know, your bookkeeper does chart of accounts, right? They gotta build that out, right? They gotta build out your categories. They have to review your transactions, and that same amount of thought should be put in a recruiting system before you even hired one person. You know, the system should be like done, built, and you know, I think we were talking about people working in different like roles, right? Like kind of transitioning in different things, and you know, I'll kind of brush up on some compliance when it comes to that. Is if you know that you're going to take somebody in one role and put them in another, even a different environment, right? Like maybe they're doing the same thing, but it's like they're working with different terms. That the best way to move forward with that is to have something that they can review ahead of time. Yeah. You don't want to just throw them in, right? I would say two recommendations would be to yourself sit down and build out like these documents. Like, this is a corporate environment. Here's some terms. You can use AI, right, for this stuff. Go on ChatGPT and say, hey, give me 50 terms and their definitions that are specific to broadcast. Boom, there you go. And when people get hired by your company, have them review these things. Say, hey, thank you for working for our company. Here's some environments you might be working in. Here's some notes you can take with you. Here's some printouts, an email that has these things. Get familiar with these because you're going to be working in these different environments. Another thing, too, I'd recommend is not for you to be, you know, if you're not at the job, not for you to be the one that they call if they're kind of confused about things, but have somebody there. Somebody, whether it's a client, whether it's like a colleague, somebody there for them to say, hey, you know, I see they say they're working in this broadcast, right? They went from a festival, now they're in broadcast. So make sure that when they transition into this other environment, there's somebody specific, like physically there, that can kind of steer them with the terms and stuff like that.
Yeah, and you mentioned documentation. I'll touch on that. That like, for example, you might be finding talent from another industry. Say there's an A2 that's coming from, you know, location shoots and is really accustomed at, you know, miking up the talent, but not necessarily coaching them. And then you bring them into a corporate environment, and then in the corporate world, the A2 actually overlaps a lot with a stage manager. Like, they're going to be coaching talent on when you go on stage, where you should stand. And so even though the skill set, like the audio skill set that makes them an A2, it's the same technology, the same microphones, the same equipment and everything, but the environment is so different. And I love what you said about making sure that all of that's documented so that, you know, they have that to refer to. There's an understanding you don't have surprises on set.
Yeah, if the environment calls for the A2 to double up, right, because of that's just that industry, that's what they do. Yeah. Make sure it's documented. Make sure that you have a way for them to see something and acknowledge it, even if it's an email saying thank you, like it's an acknowledgement, right? And that keeps you compliant. Again, I'm speaking from a hiring employees point of view, which I think is the most safe, right? If you want to treat somebody, if they're a contractor, it's much easier. You know, I don't recommend it because it kind of puts you in a lot of gray area, but it's much easier when it comes to you know, saying, this is what I need. Can you do it, yes or no?
Yeah.
I agree completely. And I think that the documentation serves additional purposes too, because on one hand, if you're answering the same question over and over again, why isn't that documented? That should be written down. You should have documentation on that. And in addition, it also allows the flexibility and the opportunities for additional people. So it's like, if, you know, to John's point, his example, if you have a document that basically lays out what an A2 is going to be doing in a corporate environment, not only can you bring in an A2 from a sports environment or an on-site set. You can also say, hey, Mr. Graphics Operator, here's this document if you want to read it, if you're interested in doing this, have at it. So it enhances the ability for cross-training in that way.
Definitely. I think we may be out of time. Do we have time for any questions, or are we one question? Yeah, we'll open up, take this question here in the front.
Hi, I'm Dina. I teach at San Francisco State University, and I work with emerging talent. Wondering if it might be something to consider that her students could get some kind of access to a simulation of the experience, if it's not proprietary, so that they know what to expect and how the tech is changing. You're probably going to talk to a virtual assistant. What does that look like? Like, this is how you impress the virtual assistant. And here's what they're looking for, to your point about, it's just being not an asshole, a person you want to work with, and it learn quickly. So it's not really a question, it's a request for more clarity on I love when you call it a recruiting system.
Yeah, I think different industries can be idiosyncratic, often mercurial, especially overwhelming for newcomers. So I definitely agree, especially with emerging talent, which we all agree is important to invest in. We have to bridge that gap. So either that's by way of mentorship or management who's committed to doing that process, because it does take time. Or I love your idea about VR training. I mean, that's an excellent use case for that. Yeah, simulation. I mean, you have that in a lot of fields. And
the other, quickly, because I know we're out of time, if we could also create a document with the job roles, right? With everything you guys want and need and dream up in your talent, and give it to teachers. So we can be like, let's design curriculum to build around these job roles.
What's the name of the school or organization?
San Francisco State.
I think, career development.
How can I guess I can talk to you afterwards about posting.
Yeah, let's make sure to
job
touch
posting.
base. We can.
Yeah, I think that approach to career development can often be lacking in higher education programs. And so I think that's a really important piece of just our social construct and in the academic environment and how we're preparing recent college grads for the workforce. And I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, and with that, I think we're done. So thank you, everyone, for attending,
Thank you.
and thank you so much.